Okay. Our topic tonight is caring for your holiday plants. And every year, a lot of people get these beautiful blooming plants at this time of the year. I'm going to be covering plants, Christmas cactus, some type people call it a Thanksgiving cactus or an Easter cactus, depending on when yours blooms, amaryllis, cyclamen, and poinsettias. And these are some of the probably the most common ones. Let's see, I'm trying to get, there we go. All right. And the topics that we're going to cover tonight are how do you take care of the plants when you get them now this year? If you intend to keep them and try to get them to rebloom again next year, we're going to talk about how you hold them over until the next season. And then what steps you have to take to get them to possibly rebloom next year. So we're going to talk first about the poinsettias. They originated in Mexico, and they were introduced to the United States by Joel Roberts Poinsett, who was an ambassador to Mexico from the United States. They're generally a short-lived plant originally, but they do live much longer now. In the wild, they grow quite tall, almost like a bush. And the original plants all had the red bracts. The red parts that you see on the poinsettia are not really flowers. They're called bracts. The flowers are the little yellow or green things that look like a bud in the middle of that bract section. They're short day plants, which means that they bloom in the wintertime. Some other things about them. You always hear about poinsettias being poisonous. They're not actually poisonous, but eating them will cause nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. So it's not something you really want to do. The sap can also cause a minor skin irritation if you get it on your skin. The Aztecs actually used these plants for two purposes. They were used to make, the red parts were used to make a reddish purple dye, and the milky sap from the plant was used to treat fevers. So I don't know how that went, considering that if you ingest it, you get nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. So I'm not sure exactly how they use that sap in treating fevers. Let's see. Poinsettias, when we talk about purchasing those, there's a number of colors now that are available. They have anything from white to red, and there's even some kind of golden colored ones, bicolored ones. So there's quite a selection, much more than the original all red plants. The leaves should have dark green foliage. And the whole plant should look healthy, not looks like it's drooping or anything like that. The bracts should be open and look healthy. The flowers are in the middle, and they should not be shedding any pollen. The stems are quite fragile, and they're easily broken, so you need to be very careful when you're handling the plants. And also check to make sure that you don't see any evidence of insects, either insects crawling around on the plant, webbing on the plant, very fine webbing, might look like miniature spider webs. Things like when you touch the plant, you get a bunch of flies coming up from the plant. Those would be signs that the plant is infected with insects. When you're handling them, they're very, very fragile. So for one thing, you don't want to pick them up and jostle them around too hard. They're also very cold sensitive. So if you're going to be doing a bunch of shopping and you're going to include buying a poinsettia in your shopping list, be sure you do that the last thing on your shopping list. If you buy it from a florist, generally they will give you a sheath or a cover to put over the plant. If you buy it from a big box store, you might not have that available. So be prepared to bring something to put the plant into to keep it from getting chilled. If the plant gets even a little bit of too cold temperatures, the leaves and the bracts will turn black. When you get it home, don't keep it away from any cold windows and any drafts. For example, close to where a door opens and closes often. Heat the other way, or temperature the other way, too much heat will also cause the plant to wilt sooner. So you don't want to have it like near a forced air duct from a furnace, or over a fireplace, something like that. They should be placed in sunny, bright light. They come from Mexico, so they're used to being in rather warm temperatures and very bright light. You water when the top of the soil is dry, and most plants, these holiday plants, come in a wrapper, so that makes it look pretty. You don't want to let the water accumulate in the wrapper, in the bottom of the wrapper. So either punch holes in it and put a saucer under the plant, or after you water the plant, take the wrapper off and empty out the water and then put it back on the plant. So those are some things you can do to keep it in its best form and best shape while you have it now this season in your house. If you intend to have your poinsettias rebloom, and a lot of people just toss them out after the holidays, they are some of the hardest ones to get to rebloom. But if you're up for a challenge, you might want to try it. In March, you're going to cut back the stems to about 4 to 6 inches. If you want to at that time, it can be repotted, and then you begin fertilizing every 2 weeks with a dilute solution once the new growth starts. In Wisconsin, where we live, in late May, you could move the plant outside by gradually hardening it off like any other plant that you have in the house, or seedlings that you have grown. And that's done by putting it outside in a sheltered area where it's mostly shady and very sheltered from the wind, and gradually moving it to a sunnier, windier spot over the course of a week to 10 days. Once it's hardened off, you can set the whole pot in a hole somewhere where it's going to get sun, and then water it and fertilize it for the rest of the summer. You can pinch back the stems once or twice from late June to mid-August. This will give you a bushier plant, and hopefully also more, quote, flowers, or those colored bracts. You can bring it inside in mid-September and place it back in a sunny spot inside your house. In order to get the color to develop, you have to cover it or put it in a closet or a room that's completely dark from 5 p.m. to 8 a.m. every day. During the day, you want to return it to a sunny window. Let's see. There are not a lot of problems with poinsettias. We talked about the cold damage. The leaves and or the bracts will turn brown or black and wilt if it's too cold. If you get a lot of leaf drop, that's generally due to over or under watering or fluctuating temperatures and drafts. If your plant suddenly wilts and dies, probably it was from overwatering, and the cause is a root rot. And if you had it outside, you might find that when you bring it inside in the fall, you may have brought along some insects. White flies might be a common thing that would infect the poinsettia plants. And those are very tiny. They look like little white flying moths, and they generally stay still on the plant, except when you move the plant or shake it, then you get this cloud of little white flies flying around, and then you know you have white flies. Let's see. If you, let's see. Let's see. And for white flies, they're very difficult to control. Prevention is the best strategy, so don't purchase plants that have any evidence of the flies. Insecticides are not usually a good control. There are many stages of growth of the insect on the plant, and you would have to spray several times in order to kill the adults, and then you have the next generation of adults and the next generation, the next generation. So it's very hard to control. So the best thing to do is try to avoid that if possible. The next one we're going to talk about is a plant called cyclamen. And this one comes from the alpine regions of the Mediterranean, North Africa, and West Asia. So because it comes from a mountainous kind of region, it prefers cooler temperatures and a season that has moist, or a climate that has moist and dry seasons. It's typically sold in winter because that's its natural bloom time. So it's a short day plant also. And this is not the same plant as a hardy cyclamen that you may have growing in your garden, which is an outdoor plant. There are 23 known species of this plant, and it actually has a tuber or a bulb as its root system. My daughter had one that was getting quite big and she wanted to split it. And when she dug it up, she says, "Mom, it's just this one big bulb underneath there. I can't split it." And I said, "Okay, well then you don't. You just put it in a bigger pot and keep growing." So it's kind of unusual plant. If you're selecting these, you want to choose a plant that has few flowers but lots of buds, and you're going to have to peek under the leaves sometimes to see the buds forming. That way it'll last longer and it'll bloom for a longer period. If you buy one that has all flowers on it and no buds, the bloom period is going to be pretty short. The flower stalks should be standing upright if it's a healthy plant, and it should have lush green foliage. Very, very often the foliage is mottled, or it has a design on it, as you can see in the background picture here. You want to, again, have it free of any insect activity. And it comes in 3 sizes. They are very different as far as the total height, but you can get small ones up to 6 inches tall, an intermediate size, and then a standard size, which can get to be 12 or more inches. The bloom colors are red, purple, pink, and white. And they have also different bloom forms too. You can get double blooms, crested, striped, ruffled, frilled, for example. So there's quite a variety in these plants. A cyclamen prefers to have moist but not soggy soil. You also want to take care to water along the side of the pot or water from the bottom to prevent the bulb from rotting. Do not water or pour water over the tuber itself. Because it has kind of this fine line of watering needs, it has to almost be checked daily for watering. The soil should be dry to the touch on the surface, but moist underneath. Don't overwater, and use room temperature water also. Because it's an alpine plant, it prefers daytime temperatures of 60 to 65 degrees and 50 degrees or so at night. It's more susceptible to warm drafts, like near furnace openings, than it is to cold drafts. And it prefers bright light, but not necessarily sun. It also needs a higher humidity during its blooming time. If you want to keep it blooming longer, keep deadheading the spent flowers. So that will help you to have an extended period. The one my daughter has been blooming continuously for several years. It never really has gone into a dormant cycle, but normally it does. After blooming, the leaves naturally turn yellow and die back. You can pick those off once they're dried. And when it turns yellow, you can reduce the watering and let the tuber gradually dry out. You don't want to have it like totally dried out, but you don't want to keep watering at that point anymore either. Set it in a shady or cool spot for 6 to 8 weeks. And then in mid to late summer, you move to a warmer spot and start watering again. If you need to repot it because the tuber is becoming quite big, you would replant it at the mid to late summertime or at the end of the dormant period. The bulb should be covered only a little more than halfway, so the top part of it will be sticking out. And if you want it to continue to grow, when you see new growth beginning, then you move it to a bright spot again and fertilize it every 2 weeks while it is blooming. Problems with cyclamens, they don't like to be overwatered. So although they like moist soil, they don't like to be sitting in soil. Underwatering will cause the plant to droop. And you have to remember not to pour water directly on top of the tuber to keep that from rotting. The leaves might get spots on them if you wet the foliage. So the best thing I talked about earlier is to water around the edge of the pot under the leaves. And insect infestations, again, you want to buy healthy plants that are not insect infested when you start out, because it's very hard to control. The third plant that we're going to be talking about is a very striking one, an amaryllis. Its actual name is Hippopoeastrum, and its origin is Central and South America, Mexico, and the Caribbean. It's a winter blooming bulb, and the colors can be anywhere from white through a range of pinks all the way to a scarlet red. Sometimes the blooms can also be striped or mottled, and it's a pretty tall plant. It can get to be 18 to 30 inches tall, and the leaves are long, thick, and strappy. This one sometimes needs to be staked a little bit in order to keep it from leaning. And it has to be careful that you don't tip it over because it is such a tall plant. You can actually buy amaryllis in a couple different ways. You can buy just the bulb, and then you can plant it in a container that you have, whatever you want to put it in. You can also buy what amounts to a kit where you get the bulb and you get soil and you get a pot to put it in. Or you can actually buy a potted bulb, either blooming or not blooming. So the bulb is already set in the pot and everything is ready to go. If you're buying a bulb by itself, it should be heavy for its size, and it should be very firm, not soft. The larger the bulb, the better chances for more and larger flowers. So the bigger the bulb, you might have 2 or 3 blooms on a stalk, on one bloom stalk, and the flowers will be bigger. 2023 is the year of the amaryllis, so it's probably going to be featured in a lot of different greenhouses and flower shops and things like that. When you are buying the bulb, ask for the source of the bulb. Was it grown in Holland or was it grown in South America? The difference is the South American bulbs bloom a week or 2 sooner than the North American grown bulbs. So if you are in a hurry to have it bloom, you might want to buy one that's sourced from South America. And if you have a long time till your holiday celebrations and you want the plant blooming, then you might go for the North American one. The bigger the bulb, the better it is for flower size and the number of flowers. If you get the bare bulb and you're planting it in your own pot, you want a pot that's 1 inch wider all around the bulb. So you set the bulb in there and you've got 1 inch of soil all the way around the bulb before you get to the edge of the pot. The soil should be lightweight but high in organic matter. And you only bury about half of the bulb in the soil. The other half is exposed above the soil line. You water it well when you plant it, but then not much watering until you start to see growth beginning, because you don't want to rot the bulb. When the growth starts, you want to move it to the coolest, brightest spot you have available in your house. You need to fertilize it 2 to 4 times a month during its growing and blooming cycle. And again, just like the cyclamen, don't water the bulb itself. Water around the bulb. see. Next slide here. Amaryllis are fairly easy to get to rebloom. Remove the blooms when they fade, but leave that flower stalk there as long as it's green, because it is photosynthesizing to replenish that bulb with energy so it can bloom again the following year. Continue to fertilize it 2 to 4 times a month while the leaves are green. It can go outside in the summer in full sun, or you can keep it inside, either way. Reduce the watering when the leaves start to yellow, and this usually occurs in the early fall, about September. Don't water then while it's in the dormant state, and you can store it in a cool place like 40 to 45 degrees. A basement would be good, and store it on its side. If you need to repot it because the bulb is getting almost as big as the pot, you can do that in November, but don't repot it unless it actually is almost filling the pot, because you only want the bulb to be a little bit smaller than the pot itself. In maybe late November or so, you want to start watering the bulb again. And again, start by just watering the first time, but not a lot until it starts to bloom. And the plants may need a year or so to recover before blooming again. So if you don't get a bloom the following year, don't be discouraged, because they might not bloom that following year, but then the year after that, you might get a nice bloom again. So just because you don't get it the first year doesn't mean you should give up. And the last of the holiday plants we're going to talk about, and probably the easiest to get to rebloom, is the holiday cactus. If you're looking to buy one, you want to choose a plant that has swelling buds, like you can see in the top here, actually more like this one. They're just starting to get a little pink, and they're quite small yet, but no open flowers if you're buying this in late November or early December and you want it to be blooming for Christmas and New Year's. If you buy it that it's already blooming in late November, it will be done blooming by the time Christmas comes. You need to protect this from changes in light and air temperature. Warmer temperatures will speed up blooming. So if it's in the sun and it's in a nice warm place, it will probably bloom faster than if you have it on, let's say, an east window where it isn't as warm during the day. Again, when you're looking for a plant, inspect for insects. The plant should look perky and healthy green, and it should look full. They're not actually leaves that you see there. They're actually stem segments, and those stem segments should be nice and thick and lush, not looking like they're wrinkled or anything like that. Sometimes stores have plants that are done blooming by Christmas, and usually what they do is toss them out. But you may be able to get a really good deal on a plant from a store that's done blooming this year, but it's going to do really well next year. So you might want to check that out if you are inclined to want to try reblooming this. As I say, they're pretty easy to get to rebloom. Many of them have straight or bicolored blooms, and reds, pinks, violets, whites, or gold are some of the different colors. And some of these are combinations. It'll be like pink and white or red and white blooms on the flowers. This originates in the mountainous jungles of Brazil. It's an epiphyte, which means that it doesn't actually have roots in the ground. Its, quote, roots are clinging to plants, other plants and trees and rocks, and it gets its moisture through precipitation and dew. It's much like, grows much like an orchid. It can be very long-lived. You may know people who have Christmas cactus plants that have belonged to their grandmothers or their great-grandmothers. It can also get very big. I had personally have seen them where they are like 3.5, 4 feet in diameter. And that's a huge plant, and it's very heavy. As I said before, what you see in the picture are not really leaves. They're actually stem segments. And there's two different kinds you can see there. There are, let's see, there are spring bloomers, which are sometimes referred to as Easter cactuses. And then there are the fall and winter bloomers, which are sometimes referred to as Thanksgiving or Christmas cactuses. A plant in, let's see, I lost my place here. I thought I had somewhere in here the difference between the pointed one. I think the pointed one is the one that blooms in the holiday season, and the one that has no points on it, the stem segments have rounded edges. That one would be the spring blooming one. Let's see. They usually have few pest problems, and if they're not overwatered and given the right care, they can last for years. You want to plant them in light, slightly acidic soil. A combination of 60% peat moss and 40% perlite works pretty good. Nighttime temperatures should be 55 to 60 degrees, and daytime temperatures can be 75 to 80. That's a little warm for most houses, but most of these cactus plants do quite well at regular house temperatures. You want to have bright light, but not necessarily direct sun for long periods of time. Like an east window might be good. You can put them outdoors in the summer, but you would want to put them in where there's light shade. Some people hang the pot from the branches of a tree in the summertime, so it's in the shade for the most part. You want to water frequently if the soil mix is well drained, but if the soil mix is heavier, allow it to dry a little between waterings. You want to cut down on watering a little bit in August and September to get the stems to harden up a little bit, because the weight of the blooms, when it's in full bloom, there are a lot of blooms on it. And so you want those stems to harden up so they can carry the weight of those blooms. Never allow water to sit in a pot or a saucer or for the soil to be soggy. Remember, this is a cactus family plant. You can either fertilize at full strength once a month or at a 25% strength at every feeding. So you can take your choice, whichever. You might want to keep a separate jug of that 25% strength water for fertilizing, and then you don't have to worry about doing it as worry about keeping track of when you did it last month. Okay, getting this one to rebloom, you need to water a little less in September or so, and then stop fertilizing in September. Cool nights encourage it to set buds, as well as longer nights. So this plant is good to, needs about 10 hours of dark each day for about 4 weeks until you start to see the buds form at the end of each of those stem segments. Once the buds start to form, then you can put it back in the light, and you don't have to worry about keeping it in the dark for 10 hours anymore. If you don't, if you have a cool place to put it, it will probably set buds by itself. But if you have if your house is a little bit warmer, then you need to add that dark period in order for it to rebloom. I had one of these for quite a few years, and just the fact that it was in a room that the light level was not high at night, I didn't have to put it in the dark at all, and it set blooms by itself. So, but if you have it someplace where the nighttime light is a pretty high level, then you might have to put it in the dark. Once it starts to set buds, don't move it around because it'll get it all upset and the buds will abort and you won't get flowers. So don't radically change the light level or the temperatures. And if you want to keep it blooming for a longer period of time, cooler temperatures will help to do that. Let's see here. Holiday cactus problems. There's very few insects that bother these. Cactuses generally are not bothered much by insects. However, keeping the soil too moist is one of the ways that these will suffer. If the plant is very old or large and repotting is difficult, you might want to start new plants as backups so that you have, maybe you don't have great grandma's original plant, but you have a part of great grandma's original plant that you can keep going. They do break quite easily. Repotting when they're huge is very difficult. You're probably going to break more branches than it might be worth. Also, because these last for so long, the potting soil actually wears out in the pot. And that's another reason, if you're not going to be repotting it soon, the soil just may wear out. There's nothing there left for the roots after a while. It's propagated quite easily by stem cutting. So you break off one of those stem segments or maybe a piece that has 2 or 3 segments. And you'll set that aside like on a counter. We'll let it air dry for a few days before you set it in the soil. And then you set it in the potting soil just so it's kind of touching the soil. Don't bury it too far. And protect it so it doesn't get bumped out of the soil. And after a few days, it will start to develop. A few weeks, it'll start to develop its roots. So let's see. That's about, wait a minute. I want to go back and talk a little bit about some other things. Because this naturally grows might be attached to a tree or whatever, it gets its nourishment from, let's say, bird droppings and decaying foliage and stuff that settles in that tree. And other forms of natural fertilizer. So it is a plant that requires some fertilizer in order to keep it growing and blooming well. Sometimes it's hard to tell that a Christmas cactus or a holiday cactus is actually on the decline. Because it's a cactus, it can go many months without actually showing signs of being dead, as in it's going to turn brown or whatever. But some of the signs are that the leaves are no longer, or the stems are no longer nice and thick and plush. They are kind of shriveled and it gets kind of a little gray-green color. That's what happened to mine eventually. And like I say, it was that way for a long time. And I finally decided, something's not right with this. Dug it up, and the root system was also pretty much gone at that point. So they take some time to grow, but they also take a long time to die. So having a few propagated on the side is a pretty good deal. Do we have any questions? No questions? Okay. I always add my little spiel here for how to, find some reliable information if you're looking for that type of thing. The secret to that is adding the word extension or site:/.edu at the end of your query. And we have some examples here, how to get Christmas cactus to rebloom. And then you can choose a website of a extension office that is either in Wisconsin or near Wisconsin. This is more important for outdoor plant questions because you want to have information that's relevant to your growing situation. But like for houseplants, you could take a site from, say, Arizona because they have cactus down there and they know how to grow them. So that kind of thing, it might be less important. But if you're looking for questions, growing questions for outdoor plants, you would want to have something close to Wisconsin, like Iowa, Minnesota, Indiana, Michigan, and New York also has a climate very similar to ours, even though it's not very close. So that's my little clue to how to find good information and reliable information. It's much more reliable than any of the .com sites you're going to find out there. If you're looking for information on a specific plant, you might also find an organization like the American Hosta Society. And the end of their URL is .org. And those are generally safer sites to look at too, especially if you're looking for a particular plant type that, like I say, like you're looking for hostas or you're looking for information on orchids. Those professional organizations for growing those plants are also good sites too. So with that, we will say so long for this week or this month. We'll be back in January. So everyone have good holiday season.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for watching.